Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. Great crowd. It's a surprise that I still get a crowd during this time because I'd imagine that most of you guys are zoomed out of your mind. Thank God for lots of Zooms. And I hope that you're finding the programs that are going around quite meaningful, some more than others, but as long as you're finding some meaning to that, that's all that counts. Yeah, I have received feedback from many people that they found that they've gained intellectually during this time in ways that are unimaginable. And the greatest knowledge that a person can gain during this time is know thyself, knowledge of oneself. What is knowledge? Think about knowledge as something that is known already, but you don't know yet. In other words, when you go to a lecture and you hear something, it was in the head of the teacher, and now it's in the head of the student. Hopefully, if the teacher was half decent. That you have a joke in teaching that says, what's the difference between a bad teacher and a student's 5 minutes? Basically, the teacher prepares 5 minutes before. And the information he or she just retained in their mind gets passed over to the student 5 minutes later. But ultimately, teaching is about taking information that's already there and digesting it and bringing it into your own mind. So Einstein might understand something, but you don't. And once you understand Einstein, then you've gained an intelligence. All the books behind me are full of, intellectual ideas, but it's only once I read and learn and give myself the headspace to actually study that the study will enter my brain. So you have to actually take knowledge that's always been there and bring it into you. And it's the same thing when it comes to knowledge of oneself. You are who you are. The question is, how much of that do you know? I've discovered more and more that people are actually unaware of themselves. Very few people are able to tell you, this is what I'm feeling at this moment and why I'm feeling it and what triggers me and why I resonate with certain things more than others. Why I chose to marry that person. Why I interact with the world in certain ways. Why do I resonate with certain kind of people more than others? Why am I so strong in certain principles and not necessarily strong in other principles? Everybody's very principled, I've found, on the things that they decided to be principled about. It reminds me of the bad joke of the guy sitting at the movies and he has a hat on his head. And the joke goes better in Hebrew, but it still works in English. And the guy behind him says, "Excuse me, sir, you mind taking the hat off?" Says, "On principle, I don't take my hat off." "Excuse me, sir, I can't see the show. Can you take your hat off?" "On principle, I don't take my hat off." And finally, this fellow gets so annoyed in the back, takes the guy's hat and throws it to the other side of the room. And what does he discover? That the guy in the front row is bald. There's a bunch of bald spots. So he says, the guy in the back taps this fellow and says, "Not every bald spot has to turn into a principle. Not every bald spot has to turn into a principle." I remember hearing that story a long time ago, and it's deeply resonated. Because a lot of us are very principled about stuff that we believe to be principled about, and other stuff that not necessarily are our strong points. Suddenly we're not principled. So, and yet we judge whoever doesn't have our principles, but we don't want to be judged for the principles we don't have. So the question I'm asking today is really, how much of yourself and what makes you tick do you know? Because ultimately, the only important person to know is yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but to understand how you interact with the world, what relationship you have with the world, what your place is. I give the example of somebody going into war and they have a bunch of artillery on them, but they have no idea how to use it. They have never been taught how to use a gun, how to use a knife, how to use a machine gun, how to use a grenade. They have no clue. So they have a full outfit full of material that could save their life and help them do their job. Or a guy that, or a woman that's, has all the plumbing material, but has no idea how to be a plumber, has no idea how to play with plumbing. And yeah, I have all the plumbing material, but I don't know what I'm doing with it. I don't know how to use it. So too with many of us, we have incredible skills, we have incredible talents, we have incredible weaknesses and strengths and personalities. And often I believe strengths are weaknesses and weaknesses are strengths. There's very few things in you that are a weakness without some strength, and there's very few strengths in you that are strengths without weakness. So you might be, let's say, very orderly, but that could come on the nerves of your family because you're a borderline OCD. You could be very disorganized and it could have its consequence. On the other hand, it makes you more chilled. There's rarely a personality type unless it's like on the absolute end of the spectrum, total narcissism or total hoarder, that are, objectively wrong. Most personalities are a challenge, but until I know myself and know what I'm dealing with and know the arsenal that God's given me, I don't embrace the world with a broad enough mind. I don't engage with the world correctly because I don't know who I am. It boggles my mind, having done by now, I guess, somewhere between 50 and 100 funerals. I don't know. How often you sit with a family member and you tell me about this person, and they struggle to describe the person. And, it's always the same thing. She was sweet, or he was fantastic, or what a father, etc. But very little beyond that. And it's weird for me that the kids can describe the parent, but I often wonder if the parent was able to describe himself. In other words, if I'm congruent within myself, if I know myself and I shine myself forth, chances are people will know me. Often the people don't understand a person who doesn't understand themselves. So somebody who never really affirmed themselves in this world, who did a good job. I'm not saying these people are bad or any less worthy. All I'm saying is they didn't activate their full potential. They didn't go from a place of awareness and integration within themselves. So they engage with the world in a shallow version of themselves. And therefore, they struggle to understand themselves. And the people who know them, who live with them, struggle to understand them. But then there's some people who just shine forth. Their personality, their integration is so holistic, it's so real. They're so full of their own personality. Often when kids are full of character, we say that kid's full of personality. But that's just kids. For me, I don't think being full of personality means you have to be vivacious or funny. It means that you're true to your personality. So if you're an introvert, lack a sense of humor, but are studious and thorough and moral, and that's your way, and you're true to yourself, then yes, you're living a life of character, and you're living your true life, and you're living with personality. The problem often is when we're living with somebody else's personality, or a personality that was imposed on us, or that we taught ourselves to live with, which is not true to who we are. And that creates such disharmony within ourselves. And it's rare to meet people who have done the work at some stage in their life where their integration with themselves is so holistic. When you talk to them, you just feel it's them shining through. Wholehearted, genuine, true, the faults, the strengths, the whole package. It's somebody who's almost settled in their own body, if you want to use imagery. Many of us hover outside ourselves because we haven't fully integrated within the body that we were given, within the heart that we were given, within the mind that we were given. We're almost outside ourselves. And then there's those of us who are able to literally start living within ourselves and start activating different parts of our personality, start shining, not just in one place, but through the whole gamut of human experience. And this time that we're in now through COVID, I think is an incredible opportunity for each and every one of us to delve deep. Like I really, like now that this COVID thing is going longer and longer and longer, it's not a 1 month, it's not a one-hit wonder, it's not a two-hit wonder. We're gonna be in this for a while. And it's a total reset. I really, really hope that we take this time and transform ourselves with self-knowledge from the inside out. Because as I said, knowledge is knowing what's already there, but you just didn't know it, so it's not there. It's like if a tree falls down in the forest and no one hears it, did it make noise? If you have personality, if you have character, if you have talents and you don't know about it, do they exist? And my answer would be no. They don't exist because the whole point of it is to be activated. Otherwise, it's just like fire in a Flintstone. Technically, if you take two Flintstones and you scrape them against one another, it will create fire, but you have to scrape it. Otherwise, the Flintstone doesn't, it's like, it just has fire potential. Each and every one of us has incredible potential. As they often say, the worst thing a teacher could ever tell a student, parent at parent-teacher meeting is your kid has lots of potential, because what they're implying is pretty much the kid's doing nothing right now. To be more than just a fire in a Flintstone, to be more of some than just, you know, a tree in a forest that's falling down and no one's there to hear it, to actually hear. Because I believe that God talks to us, not necessarily in the wacko spiritual way, but in the way of, if you listen to your gut, you'll often see incredible wisdom. I'm a huge believer in listening to your own gut. The problem is often people think they're listening to their gut and they're just listening to their impulse, or they're just listening to their dysfunction. But listening to the gut happens when you give yourself time to think and you clear your head from, you know, nonsense and narratives, and you just listen and sit there saying, is this right for me? Is this right for me? And those moments, I do believe, are the moments that God talks to us. If you're willing to listen, if you could clear your head, clear your heart from any agendas, from any preconceptions, and allow your gut to talk to you. I believe that the gut, another word for it's your neshama, and I believe that your neshama is actually talking to you, telling you, okay, this is your next step. But most of us, our heads are too noisy for us to listen to anything. Listen to your own voice. For me, you know, it's a privilege that people reach out to me and ask me for advice. It is. It's an incredible privilege and one of the great gifts of my job. But sometimes I just wonder, sometimes you need another person's opinion, but sometimes you could have just given yourself that advice. And not that I mind giving it to you, it's quite flattering and it's, you know, a good way to spend my time. But if you had sat yourself, you're clever enough, your IQ is not any less than mine. You know your life experiences, you know yourself somewhat. If you only allowed yourself to listen, you'd come to the same answer or maybe even a better answer. Before we rush out to a therapist, to even a spouse, to a rabbi, I strongly believe listen to your own voice. Listen to your own voice. I want to share a story. Like as I'm talking to you, I'm reminded of an incredible story that if I find it in a second, I'll show it to you. Otherwise, I'll just leave it or send you a link later. But it's an incredible story about listening to your own voice that really, really resonates. Because I strongly believe that each and every one of us is so wise. And the problem is that we don't give ourselves credit how wise we are. We, you know, in school, we pushed ourselves and we did incredibly well on tests, some more than others, but each and every one of us did quite well. And yet some stage when it comes to life, we forget about how clever we are and what we're really supposed to do. So I would argue to each and every person to really work on themselves, each and every one of us, to talk to ourselves better, Okay, I'm going to show you a story now. This is the story I'm going to share with you. I just think it says it so much better than I could ever. This is the head of this vice president of YU. He came a few years ago to the Sinai and Daba. I think he even shared the story, but I think the story is just incredible and will give you, I believe, some context to what I'm trying.
Then I went again, spiritual dimension, and the money for them was
Precious and important your family.
This was a state.
Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb is a rabbi, psychotherapist, and the Executive Vice President Emeritus of the Orthodox Union. In 1971, he had just earned a Ph.D. from the University of Maryland.
I was in a stage of uncertainty. I was then in my very early 30s, so maybe I was too young for a midlife crisis, or maybe I just got the midlife crisis earlier than some people. And I was probably depressed because of this, or just in general. And I wasn't sure where to go. I called the Rebbe. I got through immediately to the Gabbai. And in the background, he answered the phone, "Oh, hello, who's this?" in English, if I'm not mistaken. And the Rebbe said from the distance, I know it was the Rebbe's voice, because I knew the Rebbe's voice, Wer ruft Reret? So he asked me, Wer ruft? So I said, Ich bin a Yid from Maryland, from Silver Spring, Maryland. Why are you calling? I didn't say my name. He says, why are you calling? So I told him, I have questions about my decisions I have to make, about my career. I spoke to him in English. About my career. I have questions in Emunah. I'm a person with many, many questions. I'm a very, very uncertain stage of my life. And I would like to ask the Rebbe certain questions about decisions I have to make. I use the word uncertainty and decisions. So, as I was talking, the Gabbai was like paraphrasing what I was saying on the phone. I imagine so that the Rebbe should hear. You're saying, oh, decisions, Emunah, and professional choices, things like that. And I could hear the Rebbe say in the background, Zogim as es ist do a Yid in Maryland, zu wem soll reden. And der Yid heißt Weinreb. So the Rebbe Gabbai said to me, did you overhear what the Rebbe said? I didn't believe my ears, all right, because I knew for sure I didn't say my name. I wasn't going to say my name unless I was directly asked, and no one ever asked, what's your name? So he said, did you hear what the Rebbe said? So I said, no. I wanted to hear it again. He said, the Rebbe said that there's he said, he quoted the Rebbe verbatim in Yiddish, as ist du a Yid in Maryland, zu wem sollt reden, sein Nomen is Weinreb. So I told the Gabbai, my Nomen is Weinreb. So I heard the Rebbe say, Bazoi soll wissen sein, as amol darf man reden zu sich. And the Gabbai then was like stunned. I mean, you can hear, he just stopped, he short of breath. He said, the Rebbe said that sometimes it's best to talk to yourself. Is your name Weinreb? So I said, yeah, my name is Weinreb, but maybe the Rebbe means a different Weinreb. So he says, no, if the Rebbe says talk to Weinreb, you got to talk to Weinreb. So I thanked him very much, because I did talk to myself, and I don't know, it helped. It helped. Obviously, since 1971, I've had many, many questions about many, many different things. And unfailingly, whenever I have any kind of question, even if it's a question in halacha, or a question in, should I learn this Masechta, this month, or that Masechta, whatever, or if it's a deeper question about shidduchim, my family, my own personal decisions, before I speak with anybody else, I put myself aside some time, and I study something to do with the Rebbe, Likutei Sichos, or something, to kind of connect again, and I think about it myself, and I listen to my, whatever you want to call it, my inner voice, I call it, and it's very, very helpful. And I've encouraged other people, before you go asking this and that other person, whoever it is, a Rebbe, a Rav, first talk to yourself. Let's listen to what you have to say about it. Sometimes that's the best answer.
Sorry, I just realized I'm unmuted. I think that's one of the most transformational stories I've ever heard, and it's impacted me in incredible ways till today. This idea that we underestimate our own ability to offer value to ourselves. We see ourselves as being valuable to our kids, to our spouse, to our parents, but how about helping ourselves? And how about developing our own inner wisdom? It's there. I believe that God gave us all the tools and all the wisdom we need for our own situations. I truly believe that. Sometimes you might need help of somebody else to help you uncover it, but the wisdom for your problems is in you. And the only question is how to uncover it. I can't give you wisdom for your life. I could only maybe articulate some wisdom that you already knew, just give it words. And the reason I say that is because even if I might be talking and sharing with you something now, if I'm resonating with you, it's because deep down you knew it already. If it's not resonating with you, it's because you didn't know it and you still don't know it. In other words, you're not getting it. We only resonate with wisdom we've always known. So when a person says it, it's not as if they're coming and teaching you something, they're just really revealing something you knew. I'm not talking about like mathematics or those kind of things. I'm talking about like life's wisdom, common sense, principled thought. Those kind of things we know. You know it inside yourself. You know the answer to your marriage issues. You do. You might not want to face it. It might be too painful. Fair. Sometimes it is. No one's judging. But let's not fool ourselves that we don't know what our issues are. If we'd spend time listening. But we've developed so many walls, so many defenses against the truth, so much inability to face what we actually are, that often we think we're listening to our inner voice, but we're just listening to bad recordings in our brain. We're just listening to bad advice. Sometimes I watch people make life's decisions, which are just so, forgive me for the French, so stupid. 5% of common sense would have prevented that decision. And yet you can never help somebody from making a bad decision. But you just wish that that person at some stage in life realized to just follow your intuition, follow your gut. You knew this guy was bad for you. You knew that job didn't stand an ounce of potential and that you would be quitting within a month. What were you thinking? I'm not saying every time, but unfortunately, I often feel like a prophet because I see people's lives play out, and like you can actually prophesize what happens next. And it's heartbreaking. You stand under a chuppah and you know these two are not compatible. The only question is how the divorce will happen or when, but you just know it's not going to work. They don't respect one another, whatever the issue is. Someone goes for a job interview, you know that they're not going to last in that job. It's a bad fit, but the person is insistent they need the job. Fine, no one's going to stop you, but you know it's going to end in heartbreak. And I just feel like so many of us are so clever, but so clever in ideas, but such fools when it comes to ourselves. Forgive me again if I'm coming across harsh. We're fools. Like, really? Did you really think that was going to work? Did you not spend 5 minutes listening to your own voice before that when you actually made that decision? Like, I don't think most people are malicious. I don't think people makes mistakes out of maliciousness. I don't think we hurt people out of maliciousness. I think we just hurt ourselves and others because we don't think. Our mouth talks before our brain. Our ears listen and don't know how to discern fact from fiction. We spoke about this last week, but I strongly believe a person has to be ran by a moral compass inside their brain. There has to be this clarity, what's right and what's wrong, and ability to listen and sit there saying, this just doesn't feel right, and to trust that instinct. People call it sixth sense. Some people say that women have it more than men. Might very well be. But I still believe that most of us don't activate it nearly to its capacity, the ability to dig deep. There's a lot of wisdom in the books behind me, but there's as much wisdom, if not more, inside here. I'm just not spending enough time getting to know it. When I'm quiet, when I have quiet in my house, I right away run to something, a phone, computer, even a book. But what happens if I spend time with myself? What will surface to my brain? Where will my brain go? Why am I so scared of it? I believe that each and every one of us is a sage. I truly believe it. And each and every one of us has the potential to be a matriarch and a patriarch to so many others, to literally help others lead their lives and to be able to guide and share so much wisdom if we actually just uncovered it within ourselves. I often say it, I say it to older women, but I say it to everybody. You've lived on this planet, what, for 50, 60, 40 years? You've been on this planet a while. Come on, you've learned a thing or two. Why can't you articulate it? Do your kids know what you've learned about life? Have you put it down to paper? Do you know what you've learned about life? Have you learned life's lessons and actually integrated into yourself? I mean, we've been on this rodeo for quite a few years. I'm younger than probably all of you, and I've been on this planet for 30 plus years. I've learned a thing or two. What have you learned? Tons. So where is it? Where is it getting expressed? Where is it getting shared? Where in your mind is it? Like often when, as adults, we make the same mistakes we made as teenagers. And, like whether you gossip this behind somebody's back and then you discover that, they feel betrayed, and it's back to high school with all the cliques. And you sit there saying, gosh, really? I always used to say about marriage, I still believe it. If in 30 years of marriage, you're still fighting about the same stuff you fought about the first 5 years, then something's wrong. There's nothing wrong with fighting in the 30th year of marriage, but hopefully it's 30 years of learning and you're fighting about something else. But if you're walking and tripping in the same pit that you fell 30 years ago, then that's a problem. How many of us are just falling over and over and over into the same holes? And common sense is coming and screaming and saying, don't go there. Don't. You know it's a toxic relationship, whatever it is. You know that when there's no boundaries, often I find most issues are with relationships. That's when most people's common sense just flies out of the window. Relationships with siblings, you know that you need boundaries there. When you go too close, what happens? Relationship with parents, relationship with spouse, relationship with children. 90% of the drama that happens with us is in relationships, if not 100%. And if we would just have relationships based on a moral compass and be able to know, okay, this is right, this is wrong, and be able to lead our lives accordingly, gosh, so much of life's pain would have been spared. Because today, most of life's pain has nothing to do with the government, even with all the lockdown. most of the things that are putting you sleepless at night are interpersonal things. Your children, your spouse, your siblings, your parents, grandchildren, sister-in-law, I don't care, something. Your rabbi, hopefully not. It's people to people. And when it comes to relationships, they have to be guided by a moral code. They have to be guided by what's right and what's wrong. And self-preservation. Like, I wish that when we went to school, 50% of our day was taught how to navigate relationships, not just marriage and dating, any relationships. Most of us are clueless, and I'll put myself included, are clueless about what is a healthy relationship with a sibling and what is a not healthy relationship. What is a healthy relationship with a parent in your adult years and what's not a healthy relationship? What's a healthy relationship with your adult children and what's an unhealthy relationship? What does marriage look like after 30 years in a healthy relationship? What does one's self-dignity and self-esteem look like? Like, I have an aunt, God bless her, an incredible woman. She's raised a beautiful family. She's been through so much. But for some reason, she's never developed self-esteem. Never. She's twice my age, twice as wise, just incredible, person of sacrifice that, grew up in Russia and had to sacrifice for Yiddishkeit, et cetera, et cetera. But when you talk to her, you just hear her insecurities. And all she can talk about is her insecurities. And like, sometimes I'm like, don't you realize how valuable you are? Don't you realize your life experience? Don't you realize how much wisdom you have? Why are you walking around so insecure? Whatever her issue was. And she had justified issues in her youth. Like, I just feel like, gosh, if only we just believed that God put us in this world because we're good enough. And that we have enough tools in our arsenal to lead our life decently. And to avoid major mistakes. Most of the mistakes we make are not God's fault. I'm sorry. It's ours. I'm saying, you want to blame God, fine, if it makes you comfortable. But let's be honest, a lot of the bad decisions we make is just because of a moment of madness or a moment of lack of clarity. And what I wish they taught us in school, and what I wish I could get across to teenagers who are usually at that stage of life when they're making decisions, is think through this very well. Because any road you go down, there's huge consequences. And many of them irreversible. Think with your mind, think with your moral, don't think based on whatever everyone else is doing. Think deep. Find your own voice. When I see cliques in high schools, on the one hand, I feel like, lucky kids, they're so lucky. On the other hand, I feel bad for the victims who are bullied out. But sometimes I actually feel bad for the kids in the clique as well. Because how much do you sacrifice to be part of the clique? How much of yourself are you sacrificing to be part of that group of friends? Because if I had the choice, I would choose not being part of a group of friends and being able to develop oneself. Obviously, the best scenario is a group of friends that helps people, encourages people to develop themselves. But to lose oneself, to lose one's identity, to lose one's self-discovery, I think is the greatest shame. So here are my thoughts. My thoughts are that we have so much wisdom inside of us. Gosh, are we wise? And gosh, Hashem's filled us. We're running on a full tank of petrol and not on 1%. You have to press the gas. You have to turn the car on. You have to let the wisdom flow. Because once we do, we uncover that the genius is not out there. It's not a wise man or woman that we have to go talk to. It's ourselves. And the wisest person with the best advice for each and every one of us is ourselves. Thank you so much. Have a great one. And please, God, we should only meet for good things. I look forward to see you tomorrow on the program. We're going to have a program of 4, and then that's 7:45 later tomorrow night.